Good afternoon. I would like to begin by welcoming those members of the public and press who have joined us today for this meeting of Cabinet. As the leader, Councillor Dennis Jones is on leave. I, as Deputy Leader, will be chairing today's meeting. We have a number of important issues to consider at today's Cabinet meeting, but before we begin the formal meeting, I have some housekeeping information that I need to share. First, please be aware that this meeting is being live streamed and that a recording of the meeting will be available to view on the Council's website. Second, the Council allows filming and photography at its public meetings, so please feel free to take pictures and post to social media during the meeting. Third, can I ask everyone to turn their mobile phones to silent or vibrate whilst the meeting is taking place? Finally, in terms of housekeeping notices, there is no fire alarm test scheduled for today, as if the alarm sounds, please leave by the nearest marked fire exit and proceed directly to the fire assembly point. Item 1, apologies for absence. Would the Democratic Service Manager report any apologies for absence?
Thank you, Deputy Leader. We've received apologies from Councillors Dennis and Alison Jones and also Councillor Kyle.
Thank you. Declaration of interest. Does any member wish to declare any disclosable pecuniary interest or non-statutory disclosable interest? No? Thank you. Item 3. Approval of the minutes of the Cabinet meeting on 16th of July. We are being asked to approve the minutes of the Cabinet meeting held on 16th of July 2024 as an accurate account. If any member does not agree, would you raise your hand now? Councillor Cole.
Hello, my name is spelt incorrectly for the dining room extension. I'm not Coles, I am Cole. Thank you.
Thank you. Has that been noted? Thank you. Item 4 is petitions and public questions. We have received no petitions and no public questions. Item 5 is a report regarding irrecoverable debts in excess of 10,000. As the relevant Cabinet member, I will introduce the report. The Council is committed to taking all necessary action before considering a debt for write-off. This includes multiple written reminders, telephone call follow-ups, senior management dialogue with counterparts, and very necessary court and enforcement action. It can take several years before all actions have been undertaken. Despite our best endeavours, it is inevitable that small percentage of debt will remain uncollected and will ultimately have to be written off. There are a number of reasons why this happens, with the most common being where a company has gone into liquidation, an individual has been made bankrupt, a debtor has died with no remaining estate, or where it has not been possible to trace a debtor. Writing off irrecoverable debt is a necessary management tool, standard practice, and recommended as part of good financial management. The total value of irrecoverable debts is excess of 10,000, outlined in this report, is 1250801. This relates to non-domestic rates, council tax, housing benefit overpayments, and accounts receivable, sundry debt. Balances as detailed in the appendix. The write-off value represents 0.0336% of the total debt raised over the period. Thank you. Now, members, will I have any questions? Councillor Cole, can I start with you?
Thank you. Are there any improvements or lessons learnt from this financial year that could help to recover further or more debt in the coming financial year?
Thank you. Cecilia, if you would like to respond to that.
Thank you, Chair. So we are very hot on debt recovery already, and we do a write-off exercise twice a year. So, for instance, when we set our council tax and business rates, collection rates, you will know that we know we're not going to be able to collect 100%. Businesses go into administration, council taxpayers sometimes disappear. So we will pursue the debt until there is absolutely no prospect of recovery, and that's when we write off. So I don't think we've learned anything this year that we didn't know already. But thank you for the question.
Thank you for your response. Councillor Jamil?
Thank you, Chair. Just for my curiosity, if someone doesn't pay their council debt, can you just talk me through the process? If someone doesn't pay this year's, how is it then chased up?
So I'll have to try to remember this correctly. So when an instalment is late, there is a reminder that goes out. If payment is not received after the first reminder, the full liability for the year becomes due. If there is still no payment forthcoming, we go to court and we obtain a liability order which enables us to send the bailiffs in. And once we have a liability order, we can collect for longer, even if it takes 7-8 years, we can still collect. It's important that we take court action as early as possible, otherwise it can be difficult later. Sometimes council taxpayers might lose the job, they might move out to the area, then we use tracing agencies to find people. We are very persistent with collecting council tax. We're also a preferential creditor, so people take advice from the Citizens Advice Bureau. If they got multiple debts, it is quite typical. They will be advised, pay your council tax first, because you will be taken to court, and eventually people might go to prison as well for non-payment. So it is a serious matter.
Thank you.
Chair, can I just come back? Do we ever sell the debt off so we get less money back in return, so we don't do that?
No, not for council tax. That has been possible in the past. Typically, it would be for mortgages, when local authorities were lender of last resort and we provided mortgage funding. Sometimes they were difficult to collect because we were lending to people who wouldn't be able to get funding from banks. So back in maybe the 80s and 90s, that debt was lumped together and there were agencies out there who would buy that off the council. We would never sell off council tax debt or business rates.
Thank you. Do you have a follow-up question, Jamil? Okay. I have questions for you, Cecilia. Now, you state in the report that it takes several years before all actions have been undertaken. Can the time frame be reduced in any way?
So if we have a liability order, we can collect even longer, if it takes 10 years, 20 years even. We try to collect everything as soon as it's due. You might get somebody who loses the job, for instance, and then claim benefits, and there might be a deduction from benefits. That would typically be maybe £2 or £3 a week. It will take a very long time to clear the debt on those kind of payments terms, but we don't spread it deliberately over 6 or 7 years. We collect as quickly as we possibly can.
Thank you. I've got more questions. Right. Does the bad debt have any budgetary implications?
So when we set the council tax and business rates and sundry debt collection rates, we know we're not going to collect everything. So I think our target for collecting the round about 98.5%. So we know we're not going to collect 100%. We set aside in the accounts a bad debt provision. So we write this off against the bad debt provision. So there's no financial. We didn't assume to collect everything in the first place. We write it off against the bad debt provision, so we don't have to find additional funding to pay for this.
Thank you. My final question. According to your professional opinion, is there anything else that could be done to recover the debt?
On business rates and council tax and housing benefit overpayment, I would say no. We we pursue as much as we possibly can. On sundry debt, there are instances that we can do more than we do now. Again, if people can't pay or won't pay and are suffering hardship, there are a number of law firms out there who support people in trying to get away with not paying. Generally, we pursue quite strongly. So I can't think of anything. Maybe the relationship sometimes between local government and the NHS, there can be a bit of pushing costs onto each other. We have been quite firm in our negotiation to get the settlement for quite old debt. Going forward, we make sure that every time we take on a liability, we have an agreement from the NHS that there will be payment. Sometimes in the past we haven't been quite so firm on that. So we try our very, very best. And the team who are involved in debt collection are really keen as well. This is like a personal performance for them. So I think we probably do everything we can.
Thank you. Katie, you have a question? Yeah, go on.
Thank you. With the cost of living crisis still crunching, does the council make plans? Are there plans in case there's an increased level of bad debt? How does the council plan that?
So we have some funding for hardship, and we do use the hardship fund when people are really struggling. I think there is a good discipline in Peterborough. We have historically good collection rates because people know it's important to pay council tax and business rates. So I think there's a culture of people paying here rather than in some local authorities who are maybe not performing as well as we are, where it doesn't really matter so much, and they have collection rates sort of at the high 80s, 90%. Our collection rates in year is around about 98.5%, but we still keep collecting. So when we look in overall, we probably collect nearly 100% over time.
Thank you. Colleagues, any further questions before we move to the debate? No? Who would like to start the debate? If you're not, then I'll have to start it. Jamil.
To be honest, it feels like we're doing all that we can. So, I can't say more than that. If we can recover as much as we can, it's good for our financial coffers. So I would say I have no problem with supporting this.
Anybody else? Councillor Cole.
Thank you. I'm really pleased that we've got such a high rate of recovery for 98%. So as Councillor Jamil said, I have no hesitation in supporting this recommendation.
Thank you. I think the real issue here is whether the officers have done whatever's within their capacity to recover the debt. And I think the report clearly demonstrates that they've exhausted all avenues. Writing off a bad debt is a standard practice and good financial management. And if we decide not to agree with the recommendation, the debt would continue to show as outstanding. So I think it's in our interest that we write off the debt. The council accounts and that's it, provision needs to adjust it accordingly. So I will recommend that we support this report. So are we all in favour of it? Agreed? Okay, so we've got a recommendation, which I'd like to read out. We are being recommended to authorise the write-off the irrecoverable debt shown as outstanding in respect of non-domestic business rates, council tax, housing benefit, overpayments and sundry debt accounts. The total value of recoverable debt is excess of £10,000 allowed in the report is 1250801. Are we content to agree that recommendation? Agree? Thank you very much. Right. Item 6 is a contract award of housing-related support. And if I'm right, I will be presenting that on behalf of Councillor Alison Jones. Now, okay, I have pleasure presenting this report on behalf of Councillor Alison Jones to Cabinet, which sets out the details of procurement of housing-related support in Peterborough for the period of November 2024 to 31st March 2027. To provide some background, housing-related support has been a grant-funded arrangement awarded to providers on an annual basis, which supports the provision of hostel accommodation to homeless households by contributing towards the cost of support staff, thus helping those that are vulnerable or who may not be tenancy ready as part of their supported accommodation pathway. This historic arrangement has been subject to a number of reviews over the last 6 years, the outcome of which has been a reduction of budget as well as the recommendation to move away from grant funding arrangements to a more focused and targeted procured module. This will give providers more stability for planning and remodelling service and aims to introduce more effective performance, monitoring and joint workings amongst providers in order to take every opportunity to reduce repeat homelessness households. Specification of the individual lots to be procured are presented in the report and have been developed in consultation with service users to focus on specific needs of the client group. Housing-related support forms a key tool in the toolbox of the Council in tackling homelessness, providing a direct route through accommodation for those that may need more support to empower them to move into more sustainable and stable tenancy, and therefore I recommend this report to Cabinet. Colleagues, do we have any questions for officers? Councillor Thorburn.
The outcomes monitoring, just to ensure the procurement process is led by improving these outcomes as opposed to purely cost. Just a bit of confirmation on that, really.
Thank you. Anyone would like to respond to that, please?
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Thorburn. Absolutely. One of the most important things about this recommendation is that we're switching historical grant funding arrangements to proper contract arrangements, which by virtue of that procurement route gives us way more control over delivery, outputs and outcomes, way more ability to monitor and control performance and hold providers to account. Providers are incentivised because we're offering at least a 3-year contract, whereas currently they're getting a 1-year grant, and arguably they would say to us, what really can they do in a year without lots of forward planning? So there's lots of positives, I think, about this arrangement, not least of all the ability to hold providers who already, those in the market already do a great job, but what more can we do by holding them to account even more fully? One of the outcomes we're looking for is to move people through this accommodation into their own accommodation. We don't just want to keep people in supported accommodation indefinitely. We want to work with this cohort of people, give them the right support, get them tenancy ready and move them into their own independent accommodation. And that's definitely one of the most tangible outcomes I think we're trying to seek.
Thank you. Councillor Jamil.
Thank you, Chair. Just sort of moving on from that, I look at it that we're procuring. Is this something that maybe we could try doing in-house, or would it be more effective, or is it something that there's already so many existing providers out there that they probably do it more efficiently than we can?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Jamil. Great question. My sense is that a lot of the services that we're procuring through this contract are highly specialist, working with residents who are often presenting with highly complex needs, usually 3 or 4 different sets of circumstances or conditions, or who have behaviours that have led them to being unable to secure and maintain their own tenancy. And certainly I think for the foreseeable future, that the talent that exists in the marketplace to support those people probably sits outside the council. That's not to say that in the 3 years that we're seeking agreement for here initially, the initial 3-year period, we shouldn't be looking at alternative forms of delivery. And we can certainly do that as part of the ongoing transformation of our housing service. But I think for me at the moment, we couldn't really meet the needs of this cohort based on the capacity and expertise that we've got in-house. And I'd be looking for these external providers to deliver that for us.
Thank you. Councillor Cole?
Hello, thank you. So I wanted to ask, how is this scheme going to be used to support care leavers to ensure that they do not have the appropriate accommodation? It says in the corporate priorities that it's there to prevent, also the prevention and independence and resilience, help support residents early on in their lives to prevent them from slipping into crisis. Is this scheme going to be able to support vulnerable care leavers?
Thanks, Councillor Cole. So, yes, it's possible that this scheme can support care leavers. However, my view is that we need to be developing much more bespoke arrangements, much more targeted arrangements to support our care leavers into accommodation, whether that's supported accommodation such as this or whether it's in independent accommodation. And our Director of Children's Services and I are talking about this. We need to work up proper plans at speed and bring those plans forwards. So in the interim, yes, there will be provision here for care leavers under certain circumstances. But as I say, for me, a better outcome really is for us to provide something much more appropriate for that particular cohort. They are our young people. We need to be working with them, I think, to find the right solution.
Do you have a further question, Councillor Cole?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Jamil?
Thank you, Chair. In terms of outcomes, what are we looking for? What would be a good outcome from this type of contract that we're looking to procure here?
Yeah, thank you very much. So, I mean, ultimately, the optimum outcome is to secure a permanent tenancy for residents that are supported through these services. As I say, they're coming into supported accommodation, these residents with complex needs, and the whole premise of this contract is to work with those individuals, work through their issues and identify solutions and different ways of managing their lifestyles, and eventually to provide a pathway into permanent, self-contained, secure accommodation which is independent of the state. So that's the ultimate measure of success. Each one of the 140 units that are being procured will be closely monitored, so the contractors will know exactly which unit is being accommodated by whom and what their journey is looking like, and will be able to monitor and track their performance and provide other support as necessary. But if you think about some of the needs that this cohort of people might present with, this is a bit of a generalisation, but you know, if people are presenting with substance misuse issues, mental health issues, perhaps they've just left prison, you know, these are a cohort of highly vulnerable people that this contract will support, moving people through this process over a short period of time into secure tenancy delivers far better long-term outcomes for that group of people, as well as, of course, supporting hard-pressed council finances. So, yeah, some pretty tough outcomes, but they'll be closely monitored.
Thank you, Adrian. Councillor Cole, you want to come back?
Thank you.
Please do.
So you said about vulnerable people who may have left prison. Will this contract be able to support the early release of prisoners that's expected in September, October time?
That's a great question. So we're not, just to be clear, expecting huge numbers of offenders to be released early in Peterborough. So that's an important point to make. And therefore, you know, one would expect this contract and other services that are provided. This isn't the only form of supported accommodation that is available in the city, to be able to support whatever ratio of offenders from prison released early aren't able to secure their accommodation. So in part, yes. I think the problem we have today is we don't really know yet what circumstances those early released offenders will present with. But there are also a range of other services out there to support them. The prison themselves will be making sure that early released offenders aren't just released into society without some kind of accommodation pathway. We're engaging very closely with the prison on this already, as well as our social housing providers. So I'm optimistic the impact of the early release programme won't be to the detriment of the support we need to provide to everybody else as well. I think there's enough capacity in the system to be able to cope.
Thank you. Any further questions? I have a question for you, Adrian. Under the heading of consultation, I understand we did a consultation. What was the outcome of the consultation, and did we consult any other stakeholders and partners other than the existing grant recipients?
Yes, we did. So current grant recipients such as YMCA, some of our social housing providers have been very engaged since the inception of this. About a year ago, we started to talk to them about changing the way that we fund this work. And they've effectively co-produced a specification. During that period, we spoke with a number of service users, both people who are already in supported accommodation for various reasons, and those that have been through that journey and are now in their own secure, independent accommodations. We wanted to understand for them what a good outcome looked like and how we got there. There's fairly extensive engagement there. And then we've spoken with a range of support services. There are probably 20 or 25 different agencies in the city that already provide support to this cohort, such as drugs and alcohol services, the NHS, a whole range of voluntary organisations. All of those have been engaged throughout to make sure that what we're shaping here is a fit-for-purpose specification that, as I said before, doesn't just keep people in supported accommodation, but allows them to move through with dignity into their own independent home.
Now, under the heading of financial implications, now, the contract award between 1st November 2024, 31st March 2027, and it says with the option for extension. So are we going to avail that option for extension?
So the recommendation we're seeking today is to delegate approval for the contract for the 3 years, the initial 3 years only. And I think we've done that for a couple of reasons. First of all, this is a new method of working. To Councillor Thorborn's point, we want to make sure that the outcomes that are delivered through this arrangement are robust and effective. And until we've had a good year or two of delivery, I can't be confident that the model is correct. So we want to reserve the option not to automatically extend. The second point, and I guess is to Councillor Jamil's point, is that we may want to consider during that 3 years a completely different method of delivery, including an in-house model as part of the transformation of our housing service, which might be more effective, might be more cost effective, might deliver better outcomes still. So 3 years is what we're seeking, and if we require agreement to extend, we'll be bringing that back here for further debate.
Thank you very much. Any further questions, colleagues? If you don't have any questions, then we could start the debate. Who's going to start the debate? Councillor Cole?
Thank you. I just wanted to say I'm really glad to hear that there's conversations with the Director of Children's Services regarding support to care leavers, because it's vital that all of our children in Peterborough are supported. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jamil?
Yeah, thank you. I also welcome the fact that it's going to be an annual award for a fixed period more than just the 1 year, to give a bit of stability to those who can plan organisations. And I think that would be more effective than knowing that you can only do something for a year and then you may not be able to do it. So I would certainly welcome that, and I will be supporting the recommendation.
Thank you. And my final say on it is, basically the report is asking us to give agent the power to make the decision. And I think to deliver that, we'll have to agree with it for him to function. So I have no reservation of not supporting his recommendation. So Cabinet is recommended to delegate the decision-making function in relation to the outcome of the procurement and the contract award of housing-related support to the Executive Director of Place and Economy. The contracts award shall be for the contract period 1st of November 2024 to 31st March 2027, an optional extension period 2 times 1 year, and the total contract value shall not exceed 1868992. Are we all in agreement? Thank you. Right, the next item is a report relating to Smart Manufacturing Alliance. Opportunity Peterborough. Can I ask Councillor Nick Thorburn Cabinet Member for Growth and Regeneration to present this report, please.
Thank you, Chair. Through you. This report seeks Cabinet approval following a recommendation from the Shareholder Cabinet Committee to wind up the Smart Manufacturing Alliance, a joint venture between Opportunity Peterborough and the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Combined Authority. Launched in 2021, the SMA delivered a range of support to the manufacturing sector across Peterborough and Cambridgeshire, including networking events, business mentoring and grant funding. The original business case was based on the SMA generating sufficient income to become self-sufficient. However, launching during the COVID pandemic and increased economic pressure across the manufacturing sector mean this hasn't been possible. Support for the manufacturing sector across our city and region will still be provided by the Chamber of Commerce and our new economic growth strategy.
Thank you. Any questions for officers? No, I don't have any questions. Right, so can we move to the debate then? Who would like to start the debate? Councillor Jamil?
The fact that it's been through the shareholder cabinet, I just think it makes sense to close or wind up something that's not working, so I will be supporting the recommendation.
Thank you. Yes, I agree with you, Councillor Jamil. I am the chair of the Shareholder Cabinet Committee. We sat there, we had a very detailed conversation about it. We've discussed everything. And it's a recommendation coming from them. It's a recommendation coming from them. Again, it's not fit for purpose. The company is unable to continue due to lack of commercial income. And therefore, I don't see any reason why we should not support the recommendation. And it doesn't have any financial implication on the council at all. So, in that case, the Cabinet agrees, the recommendation is that the Cabinet agrees to the proposal that the Smart Manufacturing Alliance Limited be wound up and authorises the commencement of the process to dissolve the company. Are we in agreement? Thank you. Right, item 8 is a report concerning the academic conversion of a school. Councillor Katie Cole, Cabinet Member for Children's Services, will you please take us through this report?
Thank you, Chair, and through you. This report deals with the academisation of Peakirk-cum-Glinton Primary School. An academy order has been made by the Secretary of State, and this council is obliged to comply with that, moving to transfer all contracts to the new academy provider and granting a 125-year lease of the land on which the school sits. This report seeks approval for those actions. Thank you.
Thank you. Colleagues, do we have any questions for officers? Councillor Nick Thorne.
Just a question on the lease. Do we actually, are we clear of what is in the lease for this school? And have the Cabinet and everyone in the room actually seen all the documents and the precursors to that lease? Because we don't want to go down a similar route as previously. So do we know what's actually in it? Have we been advised of what's on it?
Thank you. John, can you respond to that, please? Is it you?
Yeah, thank you for the question. In regards to the transfer of the building and land in accordance with the academy order and the lease requirements, I'm confident that the local authority and its officers have undertaken appropriate due diligence, including legal advice.
Thank you. Would you like to come back on it? Yeah, go on.
I'm just particularly interested. I haven't had a briefing through the Cabinet Forum or anything on this particular lease. I've not seen any documentation on it. I'm just keen that we understand what it is, and in 10 years' time it turns out to be something different would be the concern. So I personally would like to know, not in great detail, but in adequate detail, that I'm confident that the lease is in good shape and something that is future-proof.
Thank you. Something you'd like to respond to that?
Yeah, I'm confident that we've taken legal advice and the arrangements that we've put in place are appropriate for the transfer in accordance with the Academy order and the lease. The report outlines that there's a commercial transfer agreement between the school, between the council and the governing body. A deed of novation is in place, and that the ask today is to authorise the council to enter into a lease for 125 years for both the building and the playing field that's occupied by the school, and will be leased by the council to the trust, which in this case is PDET.
I think, John, the question is that has Cabinet been made aware of the paperwork? That's the question. I think you would like to come in, Neil?
Thank you, Deputy Leader. I think the position is really in terms of the main property terms set out in Appendix 1. They're the heads of terms. The heads of terms don't currently include the other side solicitors. I think the detail will be worked through. This is obviously fairly standard business for the council, and I realise there's some sensitivities in terms of recent events, but I think the main property terms are set out in Appendix 1. They don't look to be particularly controversial to me, but I mean, I'd be happy to brief you separately if that would be of assistance.
I think what the question Nick was asking, that you want to have access to those documents, am I right? Just have a look through and make sure that...
Well, sort of, yeah. But mainly it's have confidence that we don't have a reoccurrence of a recent issue and a couple of other ones. It's just, can someone say that this is a sound lease and we're not going to have any issues going forward? And ideally, I would like to see a couple of lines on it just to say this is what the lease is, particularly because of the recent fun and games we've been having, just to say that this is a competent and well-rehearsed lease that will stand its test of time. That's all I'm interested in.
I think Neil wants to come in, yep.
Yeah, thank you again, Chair. I think what the recommendation is asking for is effectively a decision in principle, with the authority being given to the Director of Children's Services in consultation with myself, and that'll involve the property experts in my team, coming up with the, dotting the I's and crossing the T's in terms of the legal paperwork necessary to facilitate the transfer. So, as I say, I'd be happy to brief you. I think in terms of disclosing at this point beyond the heads of terms in Appendix 1 is a bit difficult, because obviously there's a bit of legal toing and froing to be done beforehand, but we're very happy to do that if that would assist. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that answers the question. I was going to have a question which is under property implications, where it says, subject to any termination clauses. I would like to be interested to know what sort of clauses there would be, but I think you might not be able to answer that question at this stage. Okay, thank you. Any further questions? No? Then who would like to start the debate? Councillor Cole?
Thank you. I support the recommendation that we make this provisional order, as Neil MacArthur, Monitoring Officer, said, and wish the school the very best of luck in its academisation journey. So I support this recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Thorburn?
Just to say, I'd support the recommendation. I am keen that we follow through on a very simple next step, just so we're comfortable and everyone is clear about what the long-term position is.
Thank you. Anybody else? I think it's very hard to disagree with this, isn't it? If you look under the legal implication, it says that council is obliged under the Academies Act 2010 to cease maintaining a school on the date it opens as an academy, and to take all reasonable steps to facilitate conversion to academy status. And paragraph 7 also states that council's consent is not required for a school to convert to an academy, and if the council does not cooperate with the conversion process by negotiating and entering into a lease and property management and also the CTA, it would be in a breach of its statutory obligation to facilitate the conversion. So we have no choice but to agree, isn't it? So, right, in that case, the committee is asked to authorise the council to enter into the following: a commercial transfer agreement between the council, the governing body of Clinton Church of England Primary School and Peterborough Diocese Education Trust, a deed of innovation between council, the governing body of the school, and PDET of the governing body's interest in the following contracts to be novated from the governing body to PDET. PV system access agreement between the council and the school, and solar power purchase agreement between the council and the school, deeds of innovation assignment between the council, PDET, and the relevant third-party contractors for the council's interest in any contracts which are identified as required to be novated or assigned to PDET. Authorise the council to enter into the following: a lease of 125 years of the playing fields occupied at the school at a peppercorn rent granted by the council to PDET, a statutory transfer of outstanding areas and build land on school site from the council to Peterborough Dawson Board of Finance, the main terms of which are set out in Appendix 1, or which alternative terms as the Executive Director of the Children's Services in consultation with the Director of Legal and Governance and Executive Director of Corporate Services determines are necessary to facilitate the academy conversion of the school, delegate authority to the Executive Director of Children's Services, reasonably required to facilitate the academy conversion of the school. Are we all in agreement? Yeah, thank you very much. Right, I think I'm on the last item now. Item 9 is a report of the Quarter 1 performance report. As the relevant cabinet member, I will be introducing this report. The enclosed report and presentation provide a comprehensive overview of the Council's performance for the first quarter of 2024-2025 period. This update has been meticulously compiled from a variety of performance indicators, which have been carefully selected from the most relevant and current data sources. The content is organised in accordance with the Council's strategic priorities, as visually represented by the corporate priority wheel at the beginning of the presentation. This will allow you to easily note the Council's accomplishment and the obstacles encountering during this quarter. Furthermore, it's important to highlight that the Council's performance is not only self-assessed, but also measured against external benchmarks, including SIPFA, Statistical Neighbours, and national averages, utilising data from external sources for a more robust comparison. Looking ahead to Question 2, Corporate Performance Report and beyond, there will be an enhanced focus on providing a narrative that includes the Council's achievement against benchmarking analysis, identification of trends, and a clear direction for future focus areas, especially concerning the challenges that have been identified. This approach aims to provide a more narrative-driven, analytic perspective to better inform decision-making and strategic planning. Colleagues, do you have any questions for officers? Councillor Cole.
Hello, thank you. I was looking at the challenges that we're facing regarding children. It states in the report that although the proportion of children living in poverty for 22-23 is better than the statistical neighbours, it is not in line with the national average. A collaborative approach is needed across the council with partners to meet the challenge. So my question is in two parts, really, not just to the Director for Children's Services, but other directors as well. How are we going to collaboratively approach child poverty moving forward so that all children receive the best start in life?
Please do, Adrian.
I'll kick this one off. I'm sure my director colleagues will want to say something as well. So I think you're absolutely right. This is a complex issue, but we can completely change the outcomes for children, young people and their families if we take a proper holistic joined-up approach to this. Doing nothing is not an option. One of the stark stats that is in the report relates to the number of households claiming universal credit, which is increasing rather than decreasing, and that's potentially an indicator of how hard people are finding it to get by at the moment. So, yeah, clearly doing nothing is really not an option. There are a range of things that need to happen in my view. And fundamentally, if you look at Maslow's hierarchy, it talks about shelter first and foremost. We have to address the issue around providing people with safe, warm, secure and affordable housing in all its forms. If you get that bit right and then focus on better work, more secure work, more reliable work, work with prospects, so people moving into employment where there is a progression route, means that there's going to be more disposable income in the household. It means that children will be lifted out of poverty. Alongside that, our skills strategy work that's coming into Cabinet in September is designed to give people, parents, the opportunity to train in new professions. We're working really hard to bring new businesses into the city, so a move away from perhaps the unreliable 0 hours contracts that have been prevalent in our city to more regularised, more advanced forms of employment. And then I think community is a big part of this. So living in a place that feels safe and where you are getting support from your neighbours, your friends, your relatives should be a normal expectation, I think, of anybody, whatever their circumstances. And I think we've got to do more to make sure that our communities are doing all they can to be self-reliant, self-resilient and all the rest of it. So I think lots to go at, and I'm very clear about the role I've got to play in this as the Place and Economy Executive Director.
Thank you, Adrian. I think Matt wants to come in.
Yeah, just a couple of things that spring to mind. Well, three actually. Earning levels have actually shown quite a significant increase across Peterborough now, which I think is positive. And I know in future weeks, Adrian's going to bring in a bit of a pipeline of all the economic sort of schemes which will help further that investment. Interestingly, from a health and wellbeing strategy point of view, poverty is actually one of the 4 key priorities with health partners, which is being prioritised. So we do have a North Place collaborative which is looking at these issues more closely. So I know we do have representation in the Health and Wellbeing Board, but that's pretty key. And the other one I'd probably mention, which might be new to the Cabinet, is around the Poverty Truth Commission, which I think was kick-started last year with partners, faith, voluntary sector, etc. Because a number of these agencies will provide invaluable support in the city. And it might be helpful at some point to do a bit of a briefing on that Poverty Truth Commission work.
Thank you. Councillor Jamil.
Thank you, Chair. My question's around the environment. It says that black bin collections are going up. What are we doing in order to, I don't know, I don't want to use the word re-educate because that seems to come up all the time. But obviously we're not doing something right here. And people, if they're putting them in black bin, they're not recycling. So what are we actively doing to try and change people's, the way they work? It's basically changing their minds and educating them more. And how are we looking to achieve that?
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Jamil. Yeah, it's very frustrating, this. Just to bring it into stark focus, recycling is not only great for the environment, it's also good for our financial bottom line. It's far cheaper to process recycled waste than it is to deal with black bin waste. So this is a really important point. We have, for the first time now, got our own internal education team, and I know education, as you said, is only a small part of the process, but it's an important part of the process, because what they're able to do is to, using intelligence, target communities or individual households where there is evidence of poor waste management. And frankly, it is complex. You know, we know it's difficult to, even for those of us that are closer to the industry, to understand what can and can't be recycled. Which colour bin does it go into? You know, it's a complex scene. So we are enthused by national changes that are being implemented, slow but sure, that will make every council area across the country have to operate in the same way. So recycling and the what goes into what bin becomes much more consistent. We're also being funded to do work, for example, in relation to food waste in apartment blocks, where it's traditionally quite hard to recycle food waste. So lots of different activities that I think when combined come together to start to make inroads into the recycling rates. Overall, they are, if you look back over the last year, they are on an upward trajectory. We're just seeing a bit of a dip at the moment, and that's something we need to arrest quite quickly. But I'm confident, actually, that we've got some measures in place that I think will do that.
Thank you. You want to go another question? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I have. Thank you for that. We referred to the cost of green electric vehicles now. I know in some authorities they pool their resources so they can have a greater spending power. Is this something that maybe we've looked at with other authorities? Because I'm sure we're not the only ones who find these vehicles expensive, to see if maybe 5 or 6 of us get together and say, well, actually, we'll bulk buy. Does that make a difference, or is it something that we've looked at?
We haven't looked, as far as I know, at vehicle shared procurement, but one of the benefits of remaining, albeit at a much cheaper price, a member of the RECAP partnership, which I'm aware is an issue that came up at full council, is that we do get some collective buying power. So it's definitely something we can take into that RECAP partnership. This, just to remind everybody, the RECAP partnership is a partnership of all of the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Waste Authority, so district councils and upper tier councils basically, and we have secured a much cheaper membership fee, but in return we're able to procure things at a more economically viable rate. So we're just concluding some material recycling facility procurement, which will end up being much more effective in terms of value for money than had we done it on our own. So I think you're right. I think that's probably a vehicle, pardon the pun, to use to take a conversation in about green vehicles. I think there's an opportunity closer to home though as well with the Milestone contract. So at the moment we're looking at sharing HVO fuel between the two contracts, Milestone and Peterborough Limited and Aragon, who provide our waste facilities. And I think there's an opportunity there to also look at shared procurement of vehicles and other plant.
Thank you. Do you have another question?
I have it on another one, but if someone else has got a
Yeah.
question, I don't mind.
Is your question related to Adrian? All right. I'll give you the opportunity to ask the question then.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So it's looking at how we enable on page 49. So it's really good that our vacancy rates are dropping. I was just wondering what is being considered as a part of our attraction strategy.
Who's going to respond to that question? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. So we've done an awful lot of work under a People and Culture programme, and one of the things we've looked at is what our attraction strategy is, and we've implemented a number of benefits, additional benefits for our staff. So that in turn, as well as looking at our branding, is also part of that project. And targeted focus are some of the key things that have helped us to look at our vacancy rates and to do the attraction. Plus a dedicated recruitment team in-house as well is also beneficial for us.
Thank you. Do you have a supplementary question or no? No. Can I get an opportunity to ask some questions? No? Right, I've got a question on education skills for all. It says that enhancing pathways to employment remains a priority, with collaborative efforts underway with City College to develop a plan. Have the collaborative efforts begun, and if yes, how successful are they?
I think that's one for me. We're fed up with my
Thank you,
voice. So this comes on the back of a 100-day review that we've conducted around City College's activity. What we found was that there was a lot of great stuff going on, of course, but actually wasn't necessarily all pointing towards achieving the sorts of outcomes that we've described here today. And going back to Councillor Cole, your point around poverty, for example, we need to make sure our services are all addressing those sorts of issues. What we've done is reviewed the services, we've tightened up the curriculum, and also by working with the other two main adult education providers in the city, adult/young people, the university and IEG, the regional college, we've created a single view around pathways into better paid work. So effectively everything now that the City College is doing, bar some very early entry level work to get people confident around learning is focused on building up skills into employability. That might be basic maths and English, it might be English for speakers of other languages, right through to up to about level 3 more technical work. But then what we've created is a pathway into either of our 2 universities. We've got ARU, of course, and also the University College Peterborough Regional College and the college itself. So we're through our new skills partnership board are looking at this in the round, no longer thinking about who should own what part of the pathway and it's a competitive environment, but instead thinking about the outcomes for our residents.
I would like to apply the principle of fairness. I'd like to ask one more question, and I'll give you an opportunity, okay? All right, again, it says, addressing the needs of care leavers not engaged in education, employment or training is an ongoing focus. How do you plan to address that? Is that for you, John?
Yeah, I think so, yeah. So,
go ahead.
So there's a number of pieces of work underway in relation to care leavers who are, I think that the way the data is reported now, it's the numbers who are in education, training and employment. And we do reasonably well when we compare against statistical neighbour and national average, but we would recognise that we would want more for our children. So as part of the Children's Transformation Programme, there's additional resources going into leaving care, specifically with a focus on education, training and employment. There's a number of pieces of work underway within the council and with partners which will see work experience, additional apprenticeships and other opportunities for care leavers. We're just finalising those arrangements and I'm confident we'll have something ready for the autumn.
Thank you. Councillor Cole, I think you wanted to ask a question now? Councillor Jamil? Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. My question, page 46, jobs and money. I'm looking at that and it says the average weekly wage has reached £667.70 a week, which equates to roughly about 34 grand a year. But then if you look at the bottom of the next paragraph, it says the number of universal credit claimants is on the rise as well. Firstly, the majority of people who live in my ward never see £667 a week. So either someone's earning a lot of money, and then there are those who are not earning enough. So I just find the figures odd and surprising. So where do we get these figures from?
Adrian, are you going to respond to that?
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
I agree. It is a bit of a contradiction on one page. The figures are nationally provided figures. They're DWP. It's DWP data channeled through the Office of National Statistics, so all very credible. And we're using exactly the same measure here that we've always used. So there's been no change in the way that the data is collected or reported that might suggest a buck in the trend. I think what it points to is what sits behind it, isn't it, that really counts. And what this points to is some stark inequalities in the city still that we've got to address. So we've got generally an average level of earnings which is encouragingly, as Matt said earlier, now above our nearest neighbours and close to the national average. That's really good news. But behind that sit an awful lot of people in work poverty. Illustrated through universal credit claimants. So I think one of the actions that we're taking is to understand this data at a much more granular level. What does a ward by ward analysis show us about levels of earnings and poverty, so that we can start to tailor our approach much more. For every average figure, you'll have people way above that and you'll also have people way below it. And I think it's the way below figure that we really do need to focus on. We shouldn't lose sight of the fact that it's encouraging, though. I think the fact that we've got that average level up is overall good news, but I appreciate it doesn't resonate with many.
Thank you. Councillor Cole.
Thank you. So you have already alluded to prisoners potentially being released later on in the year. So are there plans being put in place to support the prisoner release scheme, because it's a challenge that Peterborough will need to face and will potentially put pressure on all services provided by Peterborough City Council in the upcoming months. So what's being done ahead of this prisoner release scheme?
Again, others may wish to come in on this from their service point of view, but generally the overall national programme here is being managed at a national level. There have been a number of calls already, which Matt and others have attended to brief on the way the scheme will work. We know approximately, as I mentioned earlier, the number of offenders that will be released early into Peterborough, and the number isn't huge, but obviously every single person with an additional need is an additional burden. We have a good relationship with the prison in Peterborough, and so I'm confident that we'll be able to understand the needs of early released offenders and move them into services without too much disruption. I guess my bigger concern is those offenders that are released from outside of Peterborough and that choose to come to the city. And that's something we're alive to, not least of all because we have a number of services in Peterborough which lend themselves to working with that particular cohort. So all I can say at this stage is that we're very close to this. We're monitoring very closely both the numbers and also as we start to get details of offenders and their needs, that will be baked into our planning. That we are building good and maintaining good relationships with all of the relevant agencies to make sure that there are no surprises. I'll make sure that my colleagues, my exec director colleagues, particularly in demand-led services, are made very aware of any particular needs as and when they emerge.
Thank you, Adrian. Do you have another question? No? I think, Matt, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, no, I think it's a very key issue. I don't think it's a huge issue for Peterborough, but we are keeping a close eye on it. I think, as Adrian said, the numbers are relatively small. I think the cohort coming out of prison, not trying to stereotype, but there will be drug and alcohol issues. There is a risk of reoffending in the city when they get released on a Friday, etc. I think we have a challenging issue with probation service, if I'm honest, and they've had a recent inspection, and I think we need to get more assurance around the pathway plans, because they're going to do this at pace, and they should be having a proper plan leaving prison. And I'm not convinced, and that's been challenged back to probation, that we get that confidence. Otherwise, we pick them up on the streets a few days later when they come out. I think housing and homelessness is a potential challenge. We're working very closely in multi-agency manner on this. And I think it's one we're going to keep an eye on the resources. You know, there's a case to be had around the government have changed the rules. Actually, is an argument to be had that actually that's an extra burden on local authorities. So probably one, I have briefed them, both new MPs on this issue as well, and I think it's one we're going to have to keep a close eye on. But the numbers are relatively small, and we're looking for numbers come through. I think it's September and December at the moment, but obviously that will flow into next year as well, no doubt.
Thank you. Before you allow you, Jamil, I would like to ask a question. Again, principle of fairness. My question is on children. It says that although the proportion of children living in poverty of 2023 is better than statistical neighbours, it is not in line with the national average. What are you doing to make it in line with the national average, or what are we doing?
I think I refer you to the answer that Adrian gave earlier, but I would add, I concur with very much with what Adrian has said. I think the solution there is prosperity. So I think collectively and collaboratively across the corporate leadership team, we're working together to try and make Peterborough as prosperous as possible, because we know that that's the best way to ensure that families and children will be moved out of poverty.
Thank you. You want to come in, Councillor Cole?
Thank you. I just wanted to say that the HAF scheme has currently being used by many families. We're currently waiting to see whether that scheme is going to be renewed, and it is something that I am speaking to our two MPs about, because it's a vital scheme for so many families across the city.
Thank you. Jamil, would you like to ask a question, please?
Thank you, Chair. It's related to school places. Now, according to this, 1,000 new places, applications were received for new places. That's a school almost, in itself, a secondary-sized school. Now, one of the problems that I myself as a councillor, and I'm sure the others feel, is we have children that go to different parts of the city. So you might have one children at Warrington and one at Hampton. Now, is there anything that's being done to try and rectify that? Because I understand why the problem has risen over the years. And secondly, what are we doing with the academies to make sure that there's enough provision and they're expanding as they should be in order to meet the demand? I know that we don't have many council schools anymore, but it's now our influence over the academies. So what are we doing to make sure that we've got that influence and those places will be available? Because I think I can't see it getting any lower. I think the figures will probably be growing for the next few years.
Thank you. John, would you like to respond to that?
Thank you. Well, I'm delighted to answer that question today. I think I'm proud of the last 12 months and the relationships I've built with our academies. As you'll all be aware, every single one of our secondary schools now is an academy, and that means it's an admissions authority in its own right. So therefore we use persuasion and relationships to a negotiation to develop and grow the schools. You'll be aware that there was a previous report to Cabinet regarding the expansion at Stanmore Stanground Academy in relation to the dining room. That was to facilitate additional spaces in that part of the city. In some respects, this is a good news story because it's a reflection of the success of the city. As the second fastest growing city, we see large numbers of migration into the city across the summer each year. And in some respects, demand has outstripped supply. Now, whilst that's unfortunate for individual families, it's obviously good for the city, which continues to grow and prosper. And we've got good plans in place now. With the development of the Great Haddon site for bringing forward 3 new primary schools over the next few years and an additional secondary school. Alongside that, we're working very closely with all our academies and our primary schools to see where we can expand and grow places. But we will be in this position each year for the next few years whilst supply catches up with demand. And the reasons for this is there's a legacy issue in that school-based planning when we were coupled with Cambridgeshire wasn't as robust as it maybe needed to be, going back several years.
Thank you. Do you have another question?
I have another one.
Yeah, please,
and this is it's almost ward related. ASB in the city centre. Now, one of the things that we're trying to do is attract people in to the city centre. Whereas with people, if you speak to people who used to come into city centre but don't now, it's one of the fears is begging. It's a trouble that they may have with use of something. Now, obviously, what we're trying is not working. So, what are we doing now differently to make sure that this can, going forward, that we can alleviate this? Because business is not going to move in if they know that there's going to be problems.
Thank you, Jim. That's the question I was going to ask. Why did I allow you? Adrian, are you going to respond to that? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. And it won't surprise you and hopefully will encourage you to know that city centre transformation is right at the top of my list of priorities right now. I'm being well supported actually across the organisation in that regard. So for the first time, we are taking a whole organisation approach here. We had, just to set the scene, a whole day session on this with officers from across the business. We identified at least 30 different work streams that needed to be focused on. Clearly, trying to do 30 things at the same time is probably destined to fail. So we are focusing instead on 5. And those things are things like cleanliness, just the general cleanliness of the city centre, making it feel cleaner, makes the place feel somewhere you can be proud of. The begging, particularly the aggressive begging, needs to be addressed. The empty shop units needs to be addressed. We want to curate events and make the place feel more alive. We've got a blank canvas of a stage in Cathedral Square and St John's Square behind it and King's Street behind that. So simple, curated events that don't need to cost very much, if any, money, but they can bring a place to life. A market on Cathedral Square, which I know something Cabinet set out early doors as something they want to achieve. So we will be bringing in pop-up markets, themed markets. We're currently procuring a Christmas offer, which will be not the ice rink that we had for the last 2 years, something different. So collectively, there is a lot of effort going into this space. Beyond that, and a lot of what I've described is immediate, beyond that, we need to help the city centre redefine itself, because clearly it has to change. It can't continue to be what it's always been. And you're right, retailers won't come in and open units up in a stretched market as it is, let alone under the conditions in which we're expecting them to operate. But actually we need the offer to be different. We need people to spend more time here. We need people to want to visit and enjoy their experience. So having a better food and beverage offer, making more use of our assets, the cathedral, the museum. You know, we have got some gems in the city centre. All of that has to follow what I've described earlier, which is making the place feel and be safe and a place where people want to spend time. We're talking about an evening economy more than a nighttime economy. This is something we've debated with Cabinet before. So not trying to create, immediately jump to a nighttime economy, but to create something that spills out into the early evening where families might spend more time. And then final point, I guess, for me is twofold. One, most of our regeneration schemes are city centre focused. That brings two things. One, a different feel to the city centre, Station Quarter, North Westgate, Middle Home, TK Maxx building. All of these are high profile locations which with the right investment and the right growth and regeneration strategy can bring those places back to life. And two, they bring more population into the city centre along with the university. We should see footfall increase and therefore the whole experience and dynamism of the city centre change. So lots to go at, but we're on it, and I'm very clear it's pretty much my number one priority.
Thank you. I think Matt wants to make a comment.
Yeah, I think Adrian set it out very comprehensively. I think I think relationships with the policing team at the moment, I think are probably some of the strongest we've had for quite a while. There's been a few changes afoot there at a senior level, which I think is helpful. They are very keen to put cops back in the town centre, city centre, for obvious reasons. I think the other area we're looking at is around the community safety partnership, around some fresh leadership. I think the city centre has had sufficient focus in the past. And I also think we need to recognise what's the role of the council in the city centre. You've got the Improvement District, you've got Queensgate, you've got Network Rail. There's lots of other players there. It isn't just the council. We have that enabling role, but I do think the ASB issue is a concern at the moment, and I've had that conversation with the senior police officer only a couple of weeks ago around actually what more can we do differently, and I think some of that is around the events. That evening economy needs to feel different, and I think there's quite a bit we can do collectively.
Thank you. From your response, Adrian, I've got a question. Now, you've highlighted the issues and you've said that they need to be addressed. Can you have a time frame?
Absolutely. So one of the reasons we reduced the 30 odd down to the first 5 is so that they can be the 0 to 6 month achievements. I'm really clear we have to make inroads on this immediately, and all of the actions we've identified are entirely achievable with no particular investment, just a different attitude, a different approach, the support, as Matt said, of some of our agency partners. I will just give a shout out to Queensgate. They have a new manager, or relatively new manager. She's been in post for a year, but actually has now started to look externally, and it, you know, it's a breath of fresh air, the conversation with Queensgate, who are, you know, such a big anchor institution in our city centre. I think the opportunity there now is huge, and she's very keen to work collaboratively with us. So 0 to 6 months for this first set of actions, and then we've set a 6 month to 3 year plan, and then a longer term 3 year plus plan. Some of the longer term stuff is still aspirational, but some of the more major regeneration schemes such as North Westgate will fall into that period. But we're really clear about a timed plan, and we'll be happy to share that with Cabinet in due course.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Okay, I have a question under adults. It says, we continue to experience difficulties in recruiting development of sport worker roles. However, in recent weeks, we have successfully recruited to all vacant posts. My question is, why are we continuing to see experiencing difficulties, and what have we done or changed that we have successfully recruited all vacant posts?
Hello. Hi, I'll take that. So again, I think it's in conjunction with the response that I gave to Councillor Cole earlier. I think there's a dedicated focus on ensuring that we've got the right people in the right roles. It's the focus on also the difficulty of those recruiting to those roles and the stability of retaining them as well. So again, under the programme that I mentioned, we've had a retention strategy and we work very closely with adults around that. So I think it's a combination of those things that have seen that success.
Thank you very much. Question for you, Adrian. I think it's yours. Fly tipping level remains high. The council has received a grant of 50k to support activity to reduce fly tipping, which will allow more cameras to be purchased and an educational communication campaign. My question is, how do we intend to educate and communicate with people? And do you think £50,000 is sufficient to purchase cameras to address fly tipping? Or are we able to get any further grant?
Yeah, thank you very much. Fly tipping is an absolute blight, isn't it, on every town and city up and down the country, and we're getting our fair share of it. And the challenge with it often is that, the best education, if you like, is through prosecution and enforcement and prosecution. Most of the time, fly tipping is left without any evidence to identify the perpetrator. So the purchase of what are actually quite good value cameras and their wide deployment is a really effective tool in our toolbox, and officers are currently working with Councillor Jamil to refine the way this money is spent. So cameras are a big part of it. We need to make sure that when we do catch offenders that we're publicising that widely. That is the greatest form, in my view, of education. And actually, it's, we kind of know who, the typical characteristic of a fly tipper, we know who that is. They're not generally people that are, dealing with domestic waste. They tend to be people that are trying to exploit households that want to get rid of waste. They come and collect it, and then instead of taking it to the tip, it's dumped. We know who they are, and this money will be used to try and tighten up the way that they're both identified in terms of intelligence, but also how they're enforced against and prosecuted. And is there more money? I think there will be. I think the fact that every town and city up and down the country is facing a similar issue, we are no different to any other town or city. I think we will find that there will be access to more funding. We've got a particular set of characteristics in Peterborough, lots of urban fly tipping, but also a lot of rural fly tipping, often doesn't get seen. So farmers, landowners at gateways have a lot of problems. All of that we can address through what's a relatively small grant, but we can buy quite a lot of material, quite a lot of equipment with that money, and I think you'll be surprised at how quickly we can start to make some inroads.
Thank you for your response. Any further questions before we go to the debate? No? Who would like to start the debate? Councillor Cole?
Thank you. I just wanted to say that I'm really pleased to see that the council seems to be very well aware of the challenges that it's facing, and having listened to a range of service directors giving their answers to the questions, I'm really confident that we're moving forward in the right way, and I'm happy to support this report.
Thank you, Councillor Jamil.
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to support the report itself. It's always good and refreshing when you know what the challenges are, because then you can deal with them. I think when you don't know what the challenges are, that's when it's worrying. So I'm quite happy with the report. If we can, can get 50% of those things done that are under challenges, I think we will have done well. But the aim is to try and get all of them done.
Thank you. I think we've asked a lot of questions today, and it's in the public interest that we scrutinise our officers. We ask a lot of questions. I may know, you may know, but they may not understand. So, well done, colleagues. We've had good questions. I think it's been a good debate. As far as the report is concerned, the report is asking to note it's only a monitoring report, and it will go to scrutiny. Right? So, it will go to scrutiny. The report shows that progress has been made. Again, congratulations to officers for the hard work you're doing. And council priorities and their associated outcomes. So they are making progress towards that. However, we shouldn't forget that still a lot of improvement in performance is still required. So the report is good in the sense that it gives the CLT and the Cabinet with oversight of the council's performance and progress. So in that way, I think it's a very good report that we could check and balance that. I'm happy to support the report unless colleagues could persuade me otherwise, which I doubt you can. Right, so if I could kindly read the recommendation out. The committee is asked to note the corporate performance report for quarter 1, 24-25. So it's just for us to note. So are we all in agreement? Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your time. And I think that's it for today. Is it not?
In a minute.
In a minute, is it? That's the end of my...
End of the meeting. And then the extra item at the end.
Where is that? Sorry, one second. Yeah, we've got another item. I think what Matt wants to talk to about is about the protest. Over to you, Matt.
In private one.
Oh, in private, yeah? Okay, in private, yeah, okay.
End of the meeting, yes.
So the meeting is called at end. You're released to go.